So I'm Diane with the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. The center's mission in life is to foster community economic development through the cooperative business model. The services that the center offers are tied primarily to the steps that are involved in forming a cooperative, which I'll go over in a few minutes. And essentially, we help start co-ops, we help expand co-ops, and we help shore up existing co-ops. NWCDC works in 4 states, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Hawaii. There is far more work than we can possibly serve with the 5 staff members that we have. So we have to be somewhat selective in our projects, which is probably good for both them and for us. The following criteria help us make sure that the group is ready to follow and launch into the next phase of their operations. So when I'm interviewing a potential client, these are some of the things I look for. Do they have good leadership? Are they solving for a common economic need? And economic is a key word here. If they're not solving for a common economic need, doesn't mean that it's a bad business, but it's a red flag to me that it may not need to be a cooperative. Tracy mentioned that cooperatives take a lot of effort, and while they're really great solutions to some challenges that rural community faces, they can be very time-consuming as well, and there may be better options if it's not solving for that economic need. Do they have local support? What kind of experience in the business sector are they bringing to this venture? What other kinds of resources do they have? Have they thought about how they will capitalize the business? Are they themselves willing to invest in the business? There are 7 principles. There are essentially 3 things that define a cooperative, and that is that they're member-owned, they're member-governed, and they're member-capitalized. What kind of assistance do they need? Is NWCDC, with our skill set, able to solve their particular need at that point, or do we need to bring in other consultants? And what are their short and long-term needs? Frequently, the groups that we talk to, they want to start yesterday, and so we bring some reality into that process, and we'll work with them to determine what's a good time frame and work plan that's typically less than 1 year, and it doesn't mean that we'll work with the project for just 1 year or less. It's just easier to deal with as we break it up into chunks. So how do you start a cooperative? Tracy covered a lot of the steps that I'm going to talk about, and so I apologize if you hear some repetition. Or actually, repetition is good. They say if you hear things 3 times or more, you might remember it. So there's some general steps, and sometimes these are called the sequence of events. However, they're not necessarily linear. And if you were taking notes as Tracy was speaking, you'll notice that some of mine are out of sequence with the steps that Cooperative Care took in their journey. Each step is a process and an opportunity to step back and take a moment to look at whether or not you're truly invested in this project, and is it worth taking to the next step? Do you have enough resources? And that's both in time, money, and people. The typical time it takes to start a cooperative is anywhere from 3 months to 7 years, and I'd say that on the average it's closer to 2 or 3 years based on our experience. So the steps involved, you've gathered a group of people, you've identified a common need. Now it's time to find out if the larger community that you're trying to target also has that same need. So you do a survey to determine that potential use of the co-op. After the survey, you'll conduct a cost analysis. This is part of the feasibility study, but if the cost analysis doesn't pencil out, it's not worth taking on to the next step. Given the fact that, let's say it does pencil out, then you move on to a more full feasibility study. You'll look at a marketplace analysis, marketing strategies, distribution strategies, sales strategies, operations, and the development plan itself. Again, this is a place where you can stop and vote, and the group can make a determination if they're willing to take on this challenge or not. Let's say that they are, you move on to the business plan, and if you've written a really good feasibility study, much of the feasibility study can be transferred into the business plan. But where they differ is that the business plan gives you the potential of what can be, and the business plan tells you how to get there. And also within the business plan, you'll make some assumptions, you'll have benchmarks that you'll hit, and as you work through your business once it's launched, you'll be looking back to that business plan to see how well you're matching up to what your original assumptions were, and adjusting that as it needs to be. Once you've gone through those planning processes, you're ready to form the organization. You'll draw up your legal documents. You have your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, membership, other policies. Your articles of incorporation are what give you authority to be in business, and your bylaws are your governing documents. We're not attorneys, so we always refer folks back to an attorney that's familiar with co-op law to put their stamp of approval on those legal documents. Once you're at that point, then it's time to hold your first annual meeting. At your first annual meeting, you'll elect your board of directors and you'll ratify the bylaws. Shortly after the first annual meeting, the board of directors will meet, and they will, from within their ranks, elect their officers, and they'll also start establishing committees. The committees involved may be standing or ad hoc, and the standing committees are often finance, audit, marketing, other communications. Tracy mentioned one. I made a note, but it's not coming to my mind right now, and I've got to go through this really fast. So others that are the ad hoc, particularly in the first phase, that will be capitalizing the business. NWCDC was asked to assist with their feasibility study, their business plan, and board training. Another model is Links. It was a transportation co-op they were incorporated in Idaho, but they serve Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. The purpose of the co-op was to bring together some disparate transportation systems and create a seamless one-stop shop for their consumers. This is a multi-stake stakeholder cooperative. Their membership is not just one common member, like the Oregon Woodlands Co-op was a producers co-op of small forest landowners. The Links Transportation Cooperative consists of transportation providers, institutional customers, and individual customers. NWCDC was brought in to to bring validity to their project. They were an ARA recipient, and the transportation co-op hadn't been done on this scale before. And two, we gave them some co-op 101 education and guided them on their feasibility. And last but not least, I want to talk about the co-op sector that we've worked in. We've done feasibility studies and business plans in Washington, Oregon, and Hawaii. In Oregon, we found that the laws are prohibitive for the low-income workers to start a cooperative without significant subsidy. And one of the most challenging barriers they have is that for each 50-mile radius, you have to have a fully staffed administrative office for a home care agency, and that didn't pencil out. Washington is not as prohibitive, but it does have some challenges. We worked with the Circle of Life Co-op there, and they asked us to come in and assist with their feasibility study, the business plan, and board training. However, if it wasn't for some really dedicated volunteers, I don't believe, would be in business right now. In Washington State, you have to be in business for 3 years before you're eligible to apply for those DEER contracts, which you need to take to the bank in order to get the loan for working capital. And the state only issues those RFPs every 3 years. So a startup business could essentially be up and running for almost 6 years before they're eligible to apply for those county contracts. And last but not least, we worked with Paradise Homecare Co-op in Hawaii, which doesn't have the prohibitive regulations, although they're starting to institute some, and that's not a surprise. We figured they were coming down the pike. Anyway, NWCDC provided assistance in business planning, legal documentation, board and staff training, accounting setup, operations, access to working capital, and most recently, potential new membership. So we've been there working with them as a partner all along the way in their launch, and Kimberly will tell you more about their efforts. Thanks.